Discover 7 incredible tips that transform falls into amazing survival stories for seniors over 60. Ruth sat on the edge of her garden, the fragrant blossoms towering around her like old friends. Their vibrant colors, a stark contrast to the gray of recent days, reminded her of her life's artistry, her independence painted onto every petal and leaf. But that morning was different. She had bent over to prune the tulips just as a sudden slip sent her crashing to the ground. As the soil crumbled beneath her, the realization washed over her. Her body, once a reliable partner, had betrayed her. The laughter of her grandkids echoed in her mind, but now it felt distant, like music fading into silence. In the weeks that followed, her vibrant world transformed into a blur of pain and vulnerability. Each stretch in physical therapy felt like a reminder that she was not the strong matriarch she had prided herself on being. She wrestled with feelings of inadequacy, biting back tears during sessions as younger therapists demonstrated exercises while she struggled. "You're a burden now," a voice in her head whispered, taunting her. It gnawed at her, the inner dialogue battling her frail optimism. But amid the turmoil, the universe sent Gary into her life. This retired veteran had a warm smile and a mission to empower seniors to confront their limitations. With his encouragement, Ruth slowly began to rediscover her spirit. She learned about 7 strategies to reclaim her life, each more enlightening than the last. From embrace vulnerability to share your journey, they overwhelmed her with possibilities. But doubts lingered. Could she genuinely share her story without feeling the weight of her own fragility? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Ruth prepared for the seminar to share her newfound knowledge, the anxiety mounted. A storm of thoughts clouded her. What if the younger generation dismissed her? Would they scoff at her stories of resilience? Each passing day morphed the event into a battleground in her mind, a test of her worth. But those fears mingled with a flicker of rebellious anticipation. She had forged through life, loved fiercely, and now, with the gentle guidance of Gary, she might offer something invaluable, a voice for the older generation. The day arrived, and as she stood at the podium, visitors trickled in, their laughter a sharp contrast to the uncertainty brewing within her. Would they see her? Would they truly hear the depth behind her words? Then suddenly, a voice pierced through her thoughts, someone calling her just an old woman. The verbal blow landed hard, and silence fell over the crowd. Ruth's heart raced, not just with fear, but with a fire ignited deep within. This moment was hers to own. As the weight of their collective gaze bore down on her, questions flashed through her mind. How could she convey the message that every wrinkle told a story? How could she make them understand that age bore no limits, only lessons? Ruth was enveloped in waves of worry, but it was time now, time to face them. What words could bridge that gap? With courage trembling in her fingertips, she prepared to take a stand, ready to transform that moment of disdain into a symphony of understanding. And yet, uncertainty clung to her like a shadow. Would she be able to speak her truth? Would they realize what it means to truly live? Ruth inhaled deeply, the scent of the blooming flowers, now a distant memory, mingling with the sharp tang of fear. The room was alive with laughter, but in that moment, it felt as though all eyes were waiting for her to stumble, to confirm their prejudgment. Each face in the audience became a reflection of her own insecurities. She fought the urge to look away, to seek refuge in her memories where she was a whirlwind of energy. This was her moment. Feeling the coolness of the podium beneath her hands, she let the silence stretch, allowing the tension to build like an electric charge in the air. This was her chance, not just to talk, but to break through the confines that had shackled her spirit. The harsh voice resonating in her mind was no match for the burgeoning strength within. "Thank you for being here today," she began, her voice steadying. "I'm Ruth, and I'm not just a grandmother. I'm a survivor." Surprise flickered among the audience. She could almost see the subconscious shift as they perceived her not as a frail figure, but as a force to be reckoned with. Encouraged, she recounted her fall, not just as a physical disaster, but as a pivotal moment that forced her to confront her vulnerabilities and reevaluate her worth. Each word seemed to strip away the veil of doubt and timidness she had carried, exposing the raw, authentic parts of her journey. Through stoic anecdotes and vivid illustrations of her struggles, she unfolded the 7 strategies Gary had imparted. As she spoke of embracing vulnerability, she recognized the power inherent in sharing her story. Every chuckle, every nod of understanding from her audience ignited her passion further. They began to see the tapestry of wisdom woven into her experiences, recognizing her journey as a resonant thread in their own. But with each surge of confidence came the nagging doubts, the sneaky thoughts that whispered of inadequacy. Was she truly connecting? Were they still looking past her age? The fiery remarks she had endured still echoed, cold bursts of dismissiveness. The anxiety coiled tightly around her heart as she reached the critical point, sharing the story of her recovery. "It hasn't been easy," she acknowledged, her tone shifting to one of vulnerability. "But with every step, in therapy and in my life, I've learned more about resilience than I ever thought possible." She couldn't just be a survivor. She wanted to embody the essence of resilience, unyielding and unstoppable. Near the end of her speech, Ruth challenged the audience with a question. What if we stopped defining people by their age? What if we celebrated the journey instead? The question hung in the air, bold and audacious, prompting contemplation amongst the young faces before her. Suddenly, she felt a flicker of unease. Would they accept her message, or would they retreat back into their comfortable stereotypes? She prepared for the backlash, but instead, a hand rose from the crowd. A young woman, perhaps in her 20s, stood up. "I never thought about it that way," she said. "Can you tell me more about how you rediscovered your confidence?" Ruth's heart spun with elation and fear. The moment she had dreaded transformed into an opportunity. They weren't just listening, they were engaging. Here lay the crux of her evolution, the bridge she had wondered if she could build. Her confidence surged as she smiled and began to respond. As she transitioned into this spontaneous exchange, the realization struck her. She was no longer the fragile woman struggling with her worth. She was a teacher, an advocate, a champion of voices like hers. But a darker thought simmered in the back of her mind. What else might this new path demand of her? As the discussion deepened, questions loomed. Could she fend off the insecurities that lurked, ready to rear their heads again? And what awaited beyond the podium, in the world that continued to define age by limitations? While her heart raced with newfound determination, another story beckoned her, one that promised transformation, challenge, and the need for unyielding courage. The stage had been set. Now she would have to confront what lay beyond the applause. Was she ready for the next chapter of her journey, where new battles awaited and the essence of her voice would be tested? Ruth felt a warm surge of exhilaration as she engaged with the audience. Their eyes sparkled with interest, rippling a sense of connectivity through her that had once felt distant. As she expanded on her experiences, she wasn't merely sharing her story. She was unlocking a vault of wisdom that she hoped would inspire others, challenging misconceptions, reigniting spark, and encouraging new narratives. Yet as the applause faded, a flicker of uncertainty crept into her mind. She couldn't escape the nagging thought that this could be a fleeting moment of courage, soon swallowed by self-doubt. In the following days, Ruth drastically felt the need to define what stood ahead of her. Coming off the rush of public speaking was both intoxicating and daunting. She had tasted empowerment, but the memory of her insecurities gripped at her heart, a cold reminder that the battle was far from over. She channeled her anxiety into action. Every afternoon found her seated at a worn desk, frantically typing her life experiences into a newfound blog. Her voice surged through each post, yet doubts clung to her like shadows. Who were her readers? Would they see her not just as a woman with a past, but as someone with value and insight? Every click on the publish button felt like a leap into the unknown. One evening, as the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminated her laptop, Ruth discovered an email from a reader. A woman named Laura, an accountant in her 40s, shared how she had been meaning to start her own business, but felt intimidated by the competitive world around her. Ruth's writings resonated deeply, stirring thoughts buried under years of self-doubt. This wasn't just flattery. It was a testament to the ripple effect of vulnerability. The realization washed over her. Her experience had meaning. Would she dare take the plunge deeper into this new venture of self-expression? The notion both inspired and terrified her. Was she equipped for this? Could her words reach more audiences, transcending age barriers and igniting empowerment? Weeks turned into a month. Ruth became a regular voice in various online communities, sharing, connecting, and gradually shedding the part of herself that felt unworthy of being heard. She embraced her online platform with enthusiasm, honing her skills, exploring topics beyond her comfort zone, from mental health to entrepreneurship in later life. But just as she began to find traction, her past began to claw at her resolve. A comment on one of her blog posts felt like a swift punch to the gut. Not everyone can just reinvent themselves at your age. The words echoed back at her, and she grappled with the truth behind them. Was her narrative genuinely transformative, or simply an idealistic fantasy she clung to amidst fresh challenges? Ruth stared at the screen, the sharp pang of frustration swirling inside her. This wasn't the first negative comment she'd received, yet its weight felt heavier, drawing her back to moments of insecurity she thought she'd conquered. Battling her emotions, she envisioned the room filled with supportive faces she'd spoken to weeks ago, their genuine intrigue fueling her passion. "Time to regain your ground," she whispered to herself, a mantra against the suffocating doubts. Retrieving her notepad, she mapped out her next steps, reaching out to mentors, exploring workshops, seeking ways to sharpen her voice even further. Ruth understood she was still a work in progress. This journey demanded resilience, an ongoing practice of pushing back against the tides of negativity. As she steeled her resolve, a message notification flashed across her desktop. It was an invitation from a local community group seeking speakers for a workshop on overcoming adversity. The thought of standing in front of a fresh audience elicited both excitement and trepidation in her heart. Could this be the new challenge she needed? Or would it again expose her vulnerabilities, stripped bare before a crowd eager for wisdom? The time had come to face both the audience and herself, to embrace the uncertain journey ahead. With a trembling hand, she replied affirmatively, setting the stage for another personal evolution. What awaited her in this new endeavor, and how would she confront the lingering shadows of doubt that still loomed? Ruth's heartbeat raced as she opened her email to delve deeper into the invitation. The tantalizing details of the workshop emerged. It promised a platform for not only sharing her story, but also for connecting with others who faced adversity. Yet with each word, trepidation swelled within her. She questioned the depth of her own experiences. Could she really stand among seasoned speakers, articulating her journey with the authority of someone who had truly overcome? In the aftermath of her initial excitement, the weight of anticipation shifted into a dense fog of self-doubt. As she paced her small living room, the familiar tightness gripped her chest. Empathetically, she recalled that comment, shadowing her accomplishments with skepticism. It stung anew, leaving her questioning if she was an aspirational figure or merely a dreamer wading through fantasies of reinvention. That weekend, she attended the first preparation meeting with the community group. A handful of other speakers shared their stories, each person revealing powerful experiences that captivated the audience. Ruth listened intently, captivated by the raw authenticity in their vulnerabilities. Yet when her turn approached, the knot in her stomach tightened. The gnawing feeling of inadequacy snaked through her mind. How could she articulate her journey in a manner that matched their depth? "Ruth?" the organizer beckoned, breaking her reverie. Heightened anticipation forced her to the forefront. She cleared her throat, heart pounding like a drum. I'm still figuring this out," she stammered, her voice shaky. A pause swallowed her words, but then she continued. "I've faced a lot of challenges, and I've learned from them, or at least I'm learning." The shift in focus from perfection to growth primed her mindset. As she spoke, pieces of her story spilled out. The loneliness of starting anew, the messiness of trial and error, and ultimately, the moments of joy she discovered in connecting with others. To her surprise, the room leaned in, captivated not just by her content, but by her candidness. They cheered for her spirit of transformation, and she felt the initial tinges of power fortify her confidence. Perhaps it wasn't about being flawless, it was about being real. Over the next few weeks, Ruth clung to that realization while prepping her presentation. She savored each moment spent crafting her speech, infusing it with personal anecdotes that spoke to the heart of overcoming adversity. This alignment of purpose and vulnerability instilled a strong desire to gather more insights, to elevate her skills just as she had promised herself. She sought out online courses designed to enhance her public speaking and storytelling prowess. The more she refined her voice, the more clarity emerged. Ruth began to draft not just a speech but a narrative she wished to share, dipped in elements that would resonate more broadly than her own limited scope. Reflecting upon her experiences with Laura, she pondered how her words could serve as a beacon for those struggling to navigate their own paths. Then came another surge of self-doubt, cherry-picked from the well-worn corners of her mind. What if her words weren't enough? What if the audience saw right through her facade, recognizing a woman still entwined with self-doubt? "Enough!" she snapped, cutting across her thoughts before spiraling further. Ruth grabbed her notepad and wrote, "Vulnerability breeds connection." It struck a chord, grounding her in purpose once again. On the day of the workshop, Ruth prepared meticulously. She dressed to reflect her commitment to the journey, a vibrant blue dress that resonated with her newfound sense of empowerment. The venue buzzed with anticipation as speakers mingled, exchanging nervous energy. Ruth's stomach fluttered, but beneath the surface was something more potent, an unshakable determination to connect and inspire. As she stepped onto the stage, the audience's faces merged into a supportive blur, and for a moment she felt the subtle remnants of doubt dissolve. But then she spotted a woman in the audience who reminded her of Laura. A surge of passion propelled her forward. This was her opportunity to ignite a spark of hope. "Sometimes," she began, voice steady yet animated, "reinvention isn't a matter of mastery. It's about the courage to embrace your story, with all its imperfections." The words flowed, each sentence resonating deeper, pulling her along like a current. With every affirmation from the crowd, Ruth discovered an unanticipated truth about herself, the power of shared struggle. In that instance, she realized that allowing herself to be vulnerable didn't diminish her. It fortified her in her mission. As she wrapped up, the applause drowned out her lingering fears, leaving exhilaration in their wake. The moment nothing like her earlier public speaking confrontations dawned on her, she had surpassed her expectations, turning a once electrically charged stage into fertile ground for growth. But as gratitude washed over her, a familiar shadow flickered. Scrutinizing eyes pressed into her psyche while whispers bubbled up, questioning her right to this journey. She dismissed them momentarily. And yet, doubt lingered like a flickering candle, battling against the glow of reassurance. After the event, Several audience members approached her with tears brimming in their eyes, sharing how her words resonated with them. Among them was Laura, who finally mustered the courage to join Ruth on this path of courage. As they exchanged heartfelt stories, Ruth's heart surged anew. Just as she began to grasp what this newfound connection meant, another notification pinged to life on her phone. It was a request for her to write an article for a well-known publication focused on resilience in aging adults. Her pulse quickened. Was this another leap into the unknown? Just as she thought she might consolidate her hard-won empowerment, a deeper question loomed. Would she expose herself again, risking newfound stability, to embrace a broader audience? The call to leap forward was on her doorstep, but was she truly ready to test the ever-present shadows that beckoned in the corners of her mind? Ruth sat on her couch, staring at the blinking notification on her phone. The article request beckoned her, promising the chance to share her journey on a larger scale. It felt monumental and terrifying. Could she really put her voice out there in print, where it could be dissected and analyzed? Taking a deep breath, she set her phone calmly on the table, deciding to grapple with the core of her hesitations. A swirling storm of emotions bubbled within her, excitement and fear, hope and self-doubt tethered together in the fabric of her thoughts. But the very essence of who she had been at that workshop came rushing back. She had stood on that stage, stripped bare of her insecurities, sharing her struggle and her triumphs with authenticity. Vulnerability breeds connection, she murmured to herself. Wasn't that the principle she had embraced? It motivated her to engage, to resonate, and to unlock pathways for others. As her mind drifted, Ruth thought of the countless individuals she had inspired that day. She envisioned the faces of those who had approached her, eyes glistening with a profound understanding of struggle and resilience. Her heart warmed just thinking about it. They had connected over shared experiences. What if she could extend that connection further? What if her words could reach a much broader audience, helping someone to change their narrative? But alongside those thoughts crept back her nagging insecurities. What if her story wasn't enough? A lifetime's worth of doubt lurked, ready to engulf her when she least expected it. The thought of being scrutinized again, of facing harsh criticisms, made her palms sweat. She lifted her notepad, flipping through her crowded, scribbled pages, filled with insights and reflections from her journey. In the margins, she noticed the tips she had written about resilience and transformation. A spark ignited within her. What if she structured her article around the very tips that had helped her cope? With the experience and newfound confidence she had discovered, she could empower others through her learnings. Refocusing her intentions, she started to jot down 7 pivotal insights that emerged from her personal growth and the inspiring stories she had encountered. Each tip, interwoven with real-life anecdotes, could reflect not only her journey, but the paths of others like Laura, who had also braved the personal tumult of change. Concepts like embrace imperfection and the power of community swirled in her mind, prompting her to pause. What elements encapsulated her evolution? What experiences illustrated those lessons? The rhythm of her ambitions replaced the anxiety, energizing her as she began to carve a framework for the article. She could almost feel the pulse of her voice resonating through the keyboard the moment she began to type. Each keystroke unleashed a torrent of potential, the words spilling forth like forgotten memories eager to be shared. As she wrote, Ruth felt her own fears dissipating into mere shadows, washed away by the clarity of her mission. Yet even in this flowering moment of creativity, lingering thoughts still shackled her. Would this lead her down a path of vulnerability that could open her to judgment? The persistent flicker of insecurities clawed at the edges of her focus. Realizing she had to confront the specter, she stopped typing. "Why are you afraid?" she whispered, questioning herself, digging deeper. "What do you need more, safety or impact?" The silence in the room bore down on her. It wasn't just her story anymore. It was a shared lifeline, a potential beacon for those still lost in the fog of their struggles. Ruth took a sip of water and leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes momentarily as clarity washed over her. She envisioned the article as more than a simple piece of writing. It represented a chance to foster connection, to resonate with those still seeking their voices in life's cacophony. A newfound determination bubbled up as she resumed typing, sketching the beginnings of a narrative that was uniquely hers, yet held space for others. She realized that the act of writing was not just for herself. It was a call to be more than a survivor. It was an invitation for others to step into their own stories of resilience. As she crafted the seventh and final tip, her phone pinged again. Another notification, another potential opportunity. She hesitated, caught between elation and trepidation. What was waiting for her? The thought intrigued and excited her, igniting a fresh bout of curiosity. She would finish her article, yes, but perhaps she would soon be staring down another bright opportunity that could connect her with even more voices ready to share. The fear of judgment still loomed, but it felt lighter now, more manageable. She needed to embrace the challenges that lay ahead and step through this door of possibility, no matter where it would lead. Until she could decide on her next move, though, she would finish what she started, turning her pen toward hope. Ruth's fingers hovered above the keyboard as she considered the implications of her new focus. What if this article allowed her to not only share her story, but also foster conversations that could lead to untold connections? Each word held weight, a responsibility she now understood deeply. With renewed vigor, she pushed through the discomfort that had paused her earlier. Writing became her anchor, a means to explore not just her fears, but the foundation of empowerment she hoped to instill in others. She gazed at the blinking cursor. It seemed alive with potential. Each tap of the keys was a small act of rebellion against the insecurity that threatened to paralyze her. "Embrace vulnerability," she typed, recalling how her willingness to be open with her emotions had forged bonds with those curious souls at the workshop. It had been in that raw honesty that Ruth discovered the true power of her narrative. The realization struck her. If she shared the bits that felt daunting to expose, it would further demystify the journey she had undertaken. Her phone buzzed again, but she ignored it. Instead, she immersed herself deeper into exposing her lessons. Cultivate a supportive network flowed easily as she narrowed in on how crucial her friends and mentors had been during her darkest hours. Ruth recognized how vital these connections were, not only for her, but an entire community longing for support. As she embraced this rhythm, a small flicker of doubt crept in. What if she overshared? Would her authenticity become a burden rather than a bridge? She thought of judgment, the specter that loomed even over the little moments of connection. But realizing that being transparent did not equate to vulnerability, pushed her forward. "Transformation is a journey," she wrote, reflecting on the struggles and triumphs that shaped the woman she had become. It was essential for her audience to understand that growth didn't happen overnight. Her own path had been a series of steps, stumbles, and realizations. She wanted others to see that it was completely human to have faltered, and even in those flaws lay the seeds of future resilience. The ambiance in her apartment shifted. As night gently washed over the sky, a soft glow illuminated her workspace. It inspired a fresh wave of creativity. She committed herself to genuinely seeking the heart of her experience, while pairing the principles with relatable anecdotes that reminded her of her journey. "Redefine your narrative" spilled out as quickly as the others. Ruth envisioned the audience struggling with their own narratives, those chained by misconceptions of who they were. She then visualized them breaking into possibilities at the very moment they recognized their stories as fluid, not fixed. She felt the power in sharing that insight, often the first step toward liberation. As she entered her closing tip, doubts resurfaced with tenacity. They whispered that her insights might fall flat, that they wouldn't resonate as she hoped. But she reminded herself that innovation involved risk. By embracing her narrative and sharing it, she could ignite a spark of hope or a shift in perspective for someone out there fighting their own battle. Live with intention seemed appropriate, and she smiled as she penned down her concluding thoughts. This journey was not merely about overcoming her circumstances, it was about thriving within them and learning to move purposefully forward, opening opportunities with every breath. With a sigh of satisfaction and a tinge of vulnerability, she prepared to step away from the computer when her phone buzzed fiercely again, pulling her back into the present. Glancing at the screen, her breath caught in her chest. A message from an influential figure in the writing community had come through, showing keen interest in her project. Could this lead to something monumental, a chance to heighten her voice? The thought twisted her stomach with anxiety and excitement, fueling her anticipation of the next chapter. But what did it all mean for her budding article? For the greater story she sought to craft? She could feel the synthesis of her past and potential mounting within her. And suddenly, the path forward glimmered with fresh possibilities. The door was opening wider, and she had the choice to step through with confidence. Ruth knew the time would come to unveil her piece. She could almost taste the adrenaline of that moment as she contemplated her next move. What would this opportunity reveal about her capabilities? What truths would emerge along this uncharted path? Ruth stared at her phone, her heart racing. The reply from the influential writer loomed larger than life on the screen, a beacon of validation and dread. She had practically poured her soul into the article, yet now the stakes felt inexplicably higher. Each keystroke, every deliberate thought morphed into a tangible entity, and expectation clung to her like a thick fog. She took a deep breath, attempting to quell the restless tide of thoughts cascading through her mind. What if she was unprepared for whatever this intrigue might require? Flashes of her past flickered before her like an uninvited slideshow. Failures, missed deadlines, and vulnerable moments where she felt exposed and inadequate. The mere thought of her article reaching a wider audience ignited both electric excitement and choking anxiety. Resolute, she shifted focus back to her laptop. Wasn't this the very risk she had embraced when she decided to share her journey? Each sentence she crafted was a step toward claiming her voice, an invitation for others to join her as she navigated truthfully through her experiences. She shook her head, dismissing the doubts that threatened to unravel her commitment. Instead, she opened a new document and titled it Next Steps. The act itself felt empowering. Planning her approach transformed the chaos in her mind into actionable items. She needed to leverage the momentum. To cultivate this budding relationship, she had to conjure ideas that aligned with the interests of her newfound audience. The first thought that emerged was to refine her article further. A piece that transcended her personal narrative and resonated with a broader demographic was crucial. What makes a story connect? She pondered, recalling her workshop conversations. She envisioned practical tips for resilience that others, especially seniors, could grasp. Discover 7 incredible tips that transform falls into amazing survival stories for seniors. Over 60, she typed as a working headline. The phrase felt audacious, but it sparkled with potential. Laughter bubbled within her chest as she thought of her grandmother's light-hearted stories of resilience after falls, not just physical, but how she fell into life's challenges and rose stronger. Ruth scrambled for her notes, exploring examples of overcoming adversity. She remembered how, within those moments of vulnerability, her own grandmother had shared wisdom that colored Ruth's worldview. She chuckled softly, imagining weaving anecdotes that mixed humor with profound insights, each capable of igniting hope. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, capturing the essence of each tip. Focus on maintaining physical strength, cultivate a spirit of curiosity, nurture intergenerational relationships. These were more than ideas. They were pillars of a life fully lived. A surge of passion took hold as she realized how her article could guide others, providing them with the tools to see their challenges as the beginnings of stories rather than the ends of journeys. Yet, amidst the rising excitement, another wave of uncertainty crashed in. What if her perspective felt too simplistic? The fear that her message might come from an unearned place flickered doubt through her heart. she needed to ensure authenticity edged every piece of content she created. Ruth paused, wrapping her arms around her laptop as if it could offer reassurance. It would be essential to tap into her community once more. Drawing from her network would not only strengthen her writing, but also reinforce her belief that storytelling thrives on collaboration. Who better than those within her support group to validate and challenge her content? Resolved to soften her edges and invite new input, she jotted down a list of writers and mentors she intended to reach out to. Discussion would fuel growth, and their input would refine her approach. Could this truly ignite continuation from her place of doubt to a newfound clarity? Just as she honed in on her tasks, a flicker on her phone caught her attention. Another notification. Heart racing yet again, she glanced down. A follow-up message from the influential writer, a question about her concepts, seeking further discussion, igniting the spark of her impending metamorphosis. Suddenly, the uncharted path ahead felt electrifying, a raw canvas awaiting her brush. What revelations would this dialogue unveil? Would this opportunity crystallize Ruth's evolving voice, propelling her toward that next leap into the unknown? As the day unfolded, Ruth's exhilaration battled against anxiety in her mind, like fierce contenders vying for supremacy. She spent the morning refining her draft. Each word brought forth a new layer of vulnerability, and she grappled with the intense pressure to fulfill the expectations that had formed around her. The question loomed. Could she genuinely connect with her audience, or would her attempts crumble under skepticism? With her laptop aglow, Ruth ventured into the exploration of her next steps with renewed determination. The writing felt like a lifeline, a solid attachment to the momentum sparked by the influential writer's message. Yet, with each keystroke came a flicker of self-doubt. Could her insights rise above mere platitudes? Emotions surged when she recalled her grandmother's voice, a whisper of encouragement intertwining with regret. The passing of her grandmother left a gap, a void that Ruth felt compelled to fill with meaning. If she hoped to channel those life lessons for others, then she needed to ensure every word carried the weight of authenticity. Outside her window, the sounds of life buzzed just beyond the glass, a reminder of the world's complexities. It struck her. She could draw from her surrounding environment, mirroring the vitality within her writing. Relishing in this realization, she poured an open bottle of creativity onto her blank page, structured yet messy, ready for the challenge ahead. The hit of inspiration drove her to reach out to those individuals on her list, seeking a council of trusted voices. After sending a flurry of messages, she felt a nervous anticipation rise. Would they resonate with her concepts, or would their feedback reveal holes in her narrative? She could feel the tension nipping at her fingertips, but there was no turning back now. 1 hour later, her phone pinged relentlessly, each notification acting as a current that pulled her deeper into the ocean of ideas swelling around her. Responses poured in, a mixture of enthusiasm and constructive criticism that danced a delicate tango in her mind. As she perused their insights, one suggestion ignited a fire within her. A fellow writer proposed sharing a personal story about facing fear during a fall. The suggestion aligned perfectly with Ruth's inclinations, turning abstract thoughts into shareable, relatable moments. Ceaselessly, Ruth jotted down anecdotes from her own experiences, reflecting on minor setbacks that stung and shaped her journey. Details of how each stumble became preferential learning opportunities came rushing back. A time she slipped on ice, but got back up, laughing instead of shrieking. Such narratives weren't just stories. They were invitations for others to share their own journeys of resilience. However, the undercurrent of apprehension returned as Ruth replayed an internal script. What if her vulnerability was too raw? Those haunting echoes of judgment seeped back into her consciousness. Desperate for clarity, she concluded that invulnerability, when framed through the lens of personal growth, had the power to connect at the heart level. Above all, she would remain transparent, grounding her journey in sincerity as she shaped her message. As twilight began to envelop the sky, Ruth felt a surge of empowerment. With each revision made and every shared story included, she could sense the formation of something authentic. The depth of her voice converged to a singular point of courage. This could serve not just as a narrative, but as a movement, a call to embrace the stumbling blocks that defined survival. Yet, in that pivotal moment of realization, her phone illuminated yet again, jolting her from her thoughts. A message from the influential writer. This time, the words danced with possibility, a call for a virtual meeting. The moment of confrontation had arrived. What would this meeting unveil? Would it solidify her path or challenge her resolve further? The edge of anticipation gripped her tightly, propelling her into the unknown. Ruth opened her laptop once more, pacing back and forth as the seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Her heart raced, pounding at the thought of conversing with someone she admired deeply. Would this meeting validate her efforts or expose her insecurities? With the screen glowing before her, any semblance of calm she had mustered began to fade, replaced by an encroaching tide of anxiety solidifying in her gut. As the clock ticked towards the meeting time, the possibility of failure gnawed at her. What if her concepts weren't sufficiently profound? What if her grandmother's life lessons fell flat in the harsh light of critique? Competing echoes of doubt clamored in her mind, yet one thought persisted. This was her moment to thrive, to evolve. Ruth took a deep breath, grounding herself by recalling the feedback she had received earlier. Felicity's suggestion about vulnerability reiterated the importance of authenticity, reminding Ruth that her narratives had the potential to instigate powerful connections. She clicked the link to join the virtual meeting, her fingers trembling slightly. The screen flickered to life, revealing a cozy bookshelf backdrop, and moments later, a kindly face emerged, radiating an open demeanor. The influence of this writer loomed large, yet Ruth sought not idolization, but rather a constructive dialogue, a partnership built on shared passion for storytelling. Ruth, the writer began with a warm smile, I've had a chance to read your drafts. Your perspective on resilience is not just necessary but timely. What inspired you to draw from personal experiences? The question, both straightforward and profound, startled her. For the first time, the space felt safe enough for vulnerability, the space where the true alchemy of connection thrived. Ruth felt the energy shift. She spoke earnestly about her grandmother, detailing how her teachings on falling and rising shaped her narrative. The writer nodded thoughtfully, encouraging her to delve deeper. This will resonate more than you know. Consider the mechanism of your pain. How do you see fear acting as a catalyst? This sparked an introspective turn in Ruth's mind, redirecting her focus. Could she articulate the role of fear, not just as an obstacle, but as a driving force of transformation? Her ideas began to flow, stoked by the supportive atmosphere. In that moment of clarity, Ruth discovered hidden layers within her thoughts. Each stumble in her narrative wasn't merely a block, it was a stepping stone to wisdom, a thematic resonance worth sharing. Slowly gaining confidence, she challenged herself to steer the conversation toward her anticipation of revealing her story. I want to create a voice for those who feel their experiences are too small, who believe their moments of vulnerability don't deserve recognition. A noble pursuit, the writer replied thoughtfully. But remember, authenticity carries weight. It's your unique ability to express your essence through your struggles that will forge the connection you seek. The conversation flowed, weaving between Ruth's intentions and actionable strategies. Every insight she received not only lifted her spirits, it seeded knowledge, tools for her writing and life. As the meeting drew towards its inevitable end, Ruth sensed an undeniable shift within herself, as if walls of self-doubt had begun to disintegrate. Empowered by newfound clarity, she asked about the potential for collaborative opportunities, how she could further her message through channeling her voice effectively. That's the first step, Ruth, the writer replied with excitement. This journey will take you to places you've yet to discover. As they signed off, Ruth was abuzz with energy. The once looming shadows of doubt had morphed into a constellation of possibilities. She couldn't wait to apply the insights gained. But as the adrenaline ebbed, a new wave of uncertainty crashed in. What if she stumbled again on this evolving path? What if her revelations weren't met with the same enthusiasm? Even amid the glow of newfound strength, she faced an impending decision: how to step into this journey while negotiating risks, embracing her fears. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as her mind raced through potential outcomes. This was only the beginning. What awaited her as she ventured deeper into her call for authenticity? Would the tumult of discovery be a gift or a burden? The story was far from over. The next chapter beckoned with possibilities yet unseen. Weeks passed, and Ruth emerged transformed by the insights gained during her meeting with the influential writer. Her connection to her own narrative deepened, manifesting in the way she approached her health, her relationships, and her writing. Each day became a canvas upon which she painted her evolution, a fusion of vulnerability and strength, mirroring the vibrant garden she once tended so diligently. Ruth's article, Discover 7 Incredible Tips That Transform Falls into Amazing Survival Stories for Seniors Over 60, developed into a comprehensive guide filled with authenticity. She crafted stories that encapsulated the subtle, often overlooked lessons in life's tribulations, the tenderness found in fragility, the wisdom acquired through struggle, and the strength gained from rising again after a fall. With every revision, she felt her words coalesce into powerful messages capable of touching lives beyond her own. One fateful afternoon, Ruth sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop screen reflecting her determination. After hours of reflection and meticulous crafting, she hit publish. It felt monumental. Her heart raced as she watched the article circulate within online communities, quickly engulfed in responses and dialogue. People began sharing their own stories of resilience, filling her comment section with notes of gratitude and connection. "Your story gave me hope," one reader exclaimed. "I never thought of my challenges as potential stories until now." Each notification brought a rush of fulfillment. Instead of feeling lonely and small, Ruth recognized the community flourishing around her. She had crossed the threshold from anxiety-ridden writer to a catalyst for inspiration. But it wasn't just the publication that solidified her growth. It was the connections she continued to forge. Laura, the young woman who had initially stood up during her seminar, reached out. They began collaborating, leveraging each other's strengths, creating workshops that provided a platform for others to learn about resilience and self-expression. Ruth discovered a mentor in Laura, someone who reflected her own journey back at her, invigorating her with fresh perspectives. One afternoon, as they prepared for a public discussion series aimed at seniors, Ruth took a moment to glance at her reflection in the window. She wore the same vibrant blue dress she had donned during her first public speaking appearance. But today, it radiated a different energy. Instead of apprehension, confidence surged through her veins. It was no longer the exterior that defined her, but the triumphs she had cultivated within. "Any last thoughts?" Laura asked as they practiced their transitions. Ruth paused, feeling ready to convey a message crafted from her heart. "Yes," she affirmed, meeting Laura's gaze with solid confidence. "It's about redefining our journeys. It's about embracing the imperfections." As they stood before a gathering of seniors later that week, Ruth not only shared her insights, but also enacted the very principles she advocated. She opened the floor to discussions, sparking a dialogue that flourished with shared vulnerability. The once hesitant interactions blossomed into heartfelt exchanges. People resonated with the narratives of their own lives reflected in Ruth's words, and they too began to understand the power of their own unique stories. As the series concluded, applause vibrated in the air, but what resonated deeper was the recognition in the eyes of her audience. They saw Ruth as she saw herself, a powerful survivor, a voice for resilience, a woman redefined by her journey and the stories she now inspired in others. She had shared her experience, transforming it into a movement that empowered countless individuals to shape their own narratives. In that moment, Ruth felt a profound realization. The acknowledgement she craved was now present. She was no longer merely the woman who faced a fall. She was an agent of change, a symbol of tenacity woven through layers of experience. The doubts that once threatened her resolve were now displayed as mere challenges, conquered by her willingness to share. With unwavering commitment, she continued to craft her writing, both familiar and new. The journey had fostered within her a solid confidence, a recognized competence in leading conversations that altered perceptions of aging, vulnerability, and resilience. She had taken her own fall and transformed it into the impetus for an extraordinary narrative, a blueprint for survival that extended far beyond herself. Ruth smiled knowingly as she typed the final words of her blog, highlighting the importance of community and connection in the face of adversity. She leaned back, knowing this was not the end, but rather an exciting beginning. Her voice would continue to evolve, and she stood ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, the next chapter waiting just beyond the horizon, filled with possibilities waiting to be explored. Don't let this moment pass you by. You need to subscribe now to the channel to witness more incredible transformations and stories of resilience. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show support for uplifting narratives. Comment below your thoughts and reactions. We want to hear your theories about Ruth's journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread the inspiration and connect those who could benefit from this powerful message.